So, welcome everybody to Sober Truth series, where we share stories of faith, life, recovery, just really, bringing in interesting people and getting to know them and letting you get to know them as well and see a little bit of what we're about. So today, we are here with Ben, who's an amazing man and has a story of his own that is deeply embedded in recovery and just a lot of interesting things. So we're going to jump right in and get going with this and say, Ben, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I hope I can live up to the interesting moniker, or at least somewhat, consistently somewhat interesting.
So if some of you may know, I did a radio interview a few weeks ago, and Ben is the really famous, he's up there, radio DJ for 102.5 The Bone. Why don't you just tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, let's take away the hyperbole for a second. I do a weekend radio show every weekend from 11 to 2. Got started, I'd say about 5 years ago on The Bone. We were tucked somewhere way high on the AM radio. And then
that's good?
Yeah, it's good. We were doing it for a few years, but it's funny because it was a right-leaning Christian radio a channel, and people would be in we used to be on Sundays. People would be in the car, and I can only imagine people tuning in.
That's where you started?
Yeah, that's where we started.
Oh, man.
And I just, every Sunday, everything that came out of my mouth, I was like, there's some family in their car heading to church or coming back from church, or whatever, wherever they worship, and listening to us. But then The Bone contacted us, and we moved over there about 5 years ago, and it's been a great deal.
That's an interesting place to start.
Yeah, well, it was. I don't know how we got involved in it, but it was fun. I mean, it gave me a little taste of radio, and I like to talk. I'm not much, but I am all I think about. Talking for 3 hours, and people ask, how do you do that? And it's really great. I mean, we sat down for probably 30 minutes before we press record and just had a conversation.
I love to talk as well, so that's not a good thing. We could end up just talking.
Hey, let's see how many days we can get this done.
Let's see how long we can
We'll find it interesting.
All you ever think about is yourself.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you, man. But that's typical for us that are in recovery.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you share with us a little bit of your journey, where you're from, and a little bit of your testimony.
All right. Well, I was born in San Francisco, born and raised. I bring this story up. I'm going to do a little bit of the testimony, but it's an important part of my life, and it's the first time I remember something wasn't right. And I went to kindergarten, and then finished my kindergarten year. Summer break, about halfway through summer break, my mom comes to me and she says, "They're keeping you back in kindergarten, so you're going to have to go to kindergarten again." And this was before the whole Malcolm Gladwell thing. Now parents intentionally hold back their kids because Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book that it's some beneficial thing to society. But as a 5-year-old who already went to kindergarten and having to go back to kindergarten the next year, when all your friends who you went to kindergarten with are in the first grade class, it was the first time in my life where I can remember feeling not a part of, less than, not worthy. And I remember, I didn't like that feeling.
Yeah.
So I think I probably spent the next 17, 18 years trying to never feel that feeling again.
Wow.
And, one of the things that I found before drugs and alcohol was daydreaming. And I was a huge daydreamer. To the point where they were like, something's wrong with Ben. We need to get Ben tested. But the daydreaming allowed me to physically be there, but mentally be somewhere else, right? I wasn't thinking about those feelings of being less than, or that I wasn't getting the math problem on the board, and that's what drugs and alcohol did for me.
Yeah.
Physically I could be there and present, or at least it seemed like it, but mentally I was not present or there. And then about 7th grade, I went to a party at Molly Guggenheim's house, and she had her dad sort of cleared out the living room, and he had left the little, I think it's port or brandy or something in the crystal with those two really nice glasses, and my friends went over to it and we started, got into it and drinking, and I remember just like burning the hell out. I mean, all the way down.
Yeah.
But then it started warming, and then it started getting that feeling of, after, and then I took a second sip and I closed my nose, but so I didn't have to taste it bad, but it still felt the burn. I don't think there's a solution for the burn. But I just, at that point, I remember becoming a part of the party. I'd been to parties before, but always sort of been a wallflower, up against the wall, and like, okay, just try to blend into this wallpaper. But I got off the wall, right, and I started talking to girls, and I didn't have this thing in the back of my head that was telling me, you're not good enough. They don't want to talk to you. You're not good looking, and I had a blast, and then I would jaunt over to the port and take another sip, and then go over and start talking to the girls, and then go back to the port until I threw up all over Molly Guggenheim's house.
Have you ever talked to Molly Guggenheim about this since then?
No, I actually, since I've been in recovery, yes. When Facebook and all that stuff first came out and it was good, and you started connecting.
Before it got evil.
Yeah, before it got evil.
Yeah.
Started talking, connecting with all friends, and people would add you like, oh my God, Molly Guggenheim. Like,
I got drunk at your house in 7th grade.
We talked about it. I was like, remember that party? And I was like, yeah, where your mom had to come pick you up, and we never saw you at a party for another year. So look,
I do remember that.
Right. Yeah. So the first time I got drunk, I got into trouble. But it wasn't straight trouble in the beginning, and then it just progressed. But again, I found something that was going to not make me feel the way I felt, and not make me feel the way I felt quickly. Mm-hmm. And so that sort of set the precedent for the rest of my life. I guess it was set before, but with drugs and alcohol, is that I don't like the way I'm feeling. What can I take? What can I do to do it quickly, to feel better quickly?
Right.
Not a process, not going through problems, but going around them.
Yeah.
And so, and then of course I just got involved with other drugs. And one thing about me, and I think a good characteristic of a lot of us, is that we're charmers, right? When we want to do something or get something, that we can do it. And I was always able to manipulate the system. I was always able to sort of keep the facade of everything's cool, right? Like my character defect is the everything's cool guy, you duck on the water, right? Like you see a duck floating just serenely on the water, but underneath he's kicking like crazy.
Sure.
Right, and that was me, but I was always able to juggle all these things, right? School, and by school I mean lie, cheat, or do whatever it takes to get a good report card, right? To go to mom and say, hey mom, look.
Yeah.
And I got into trouble in school for plagiarizing, and I was always, God bless her soul, but my mom was always there to bail me out. Is
that good or bad?
That's bad.
Yeah,
that's bad. Consequences was not something I ever really learned in life, I learned later. But living under the blanket of codependency is a warm, cuddly place to be, right? And so I ended up somehow being okay at soccer, and good enough to get into Berkeley with some, good grades, but not phenomenal. And I will tell you that I back in the day, there's some other people who will deny it, but I had somebody help me with my SATs, and I got.
But at least you admit that. Right. Some people don't like to admit it much later.
I try to live my life, free and clear of any burdens.
It's a good idea for all people that may have done that.
If you've ever done it.
If you've ever done that.
But so again, one of those things where Berkeley let me in, and I was supposed to go play soccer for them, and I got to the soccer early before school started, about a couple weeks, and we had this summer practice, and the coach pulled me in like after the first week, and he said, okay, look, we like you, we recruited you to come here, but here's the truth, is that our goalie was a freshman. It was a Pac-10 back then. He's all Pac-10, so you're not going to see any of your playing time until probably your junior or senior year if you're lucky. So we're going to redshirt you, so you have another year of eligibility. And meanwhile, while he's talking about this and still sort of praising me and saying we like you, but just laying it out and I'm 18, 19 years old at that point. I'm a man. Like, treat me like a man. And I'm just thinking, obviously this guy doesn't know who I am or how good I am. And I quit the team.
Yeah.
And I walked down the street. I had my soccer bag in my hand. quit right there in the office, and I saw some Greek letters on a building, and I recognized them because my brother was down at UCLA, and he had a fraternity down there, and I had gone to visit him down there a couple times and had the time of my life.
Right.
So I walked into the fraternity, and second guy I meet was some guy I went to high school with.
Really?
He grabbed me, took me up to his room. We did a line of cocaine and a shot of tequila, and I was home. You know, and despite the fact that, you know, let's just say, you know, people, places, and things that normally wouldn't hang out with, right? But they were like me. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they were partied like me. It was the Animal House of Berkeley. You know, we were on double secret academic probation or whatever they call it, and so, you know, I joined that, and so the story just progressed. It's a progressive disease. It got worse, and I use the analogy of juggling. Right, in my life, I was able to juggle up to this point before I tried heroin. I was able to, but at that point, I'd been kicked out of the Animal House, which is probably, you know,
You got kicked out of the Animal House?
my two biggest accomplishments looking back on my life, my using career, is I flunked kindergarten and I got kicked out of the Animal House.
Wow.
But then I tried heroin and smoked it the first time, and the second time did it intravenously. And, you know, I know.
How old were you at that time?
19. And you know, if there's a religious, you know, thing, that I kiss God, right there, you know, and I spent the rest of my using career trying to, you know, where is he? You know,
Chasing the dragon.
Yeah, chasing the dragon.
There's a reason they say that.
Yep. And so I was saying the juggling is before that I was able to manage, you know, having this appearance on the outside that, you know, school was okay, life was okay, work was okay, girlfriend was okay, addiction was okay, that I could balance everything, right? And then, you know, trying to chase the dragon, you know, prioritize my whole life. And then one by one, the balls started dropping off until I was just left with my addiction, my alcoholism. And, you know, I had an overdose, clinically dead, you know, but for the grace of God, I was on a landline. It was 1993. And I was on the phone with a friend of mine, and I was, you know, fixing up, and next thing I knew, I was out, door was smashed open, paramedics, girlfriend looked down, needle was still in the arm, phone was on the floor. If that's today, I'm dead.
Yeah.
Because how many times does your cell phone hang up in the middle of a call, and what do? You curse your, you know, carrier, but landlines don't drop.
That's true.
You know, landline to landline. So she knew something was wrong. She had enough wherewithal to you know, get help. So, but you know, so goes the disease that wasn't enough. You know,
right.
At that point it was okay. I got to go to treatment so I can still have this, because she sort of, you know, ratted me out, if you will, or made an ultimatum, like, you tell your mom or I'm telling her. And so I didn't want to lose that blanket of codependency, right? And my mom said very clearly, behind door number 1 is love, support, you know, pay for treatment, we'll do all this. Behind door number 2 is persona non grata.
Yeah.
Easy choice.
Right.
I'll go to rehab for her and my, you know, the girlfriend, and so. Anyways, it wasn't, you know, long. I remember I saw this counselor my first day of treatment, and he said, you know what? It's a pretty easy program. All you got to do is change your whole life.
Yep.
And I remember hearing that and going, this guy's effing crazy. Like, I'm not going to do all that. So that's where my relapse started. Started because I wasn't doing anything. And so I went back to school, and I ended up using it again, and just woke up one day. It wasn't an arrest. It wasn't any of that sort of outside stuff that had happened. I just remember waking up that morning, and I knew that I had a joint therapy session. That's the other, you know, ironic thing, is I was going to see that guy Mike Nerona, who told me it's a pretty easy program.
Right.
So I was seeing him after, and once a month my mom would come and join session. And for 5-6 months, I'm sitting there lying to him, you know, about not, you know, this is a sobriety thing. I don't really get it. You know, it's not that fun. It's not that great. It's hard to balance with school. Meanwhile, I'd been kicked out of school. My mom didn't know. But I woke up that morning, and I was looking myself in the mirror, and I said, I'm done. Sick and tired, and sick and tired. And it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't burning bush. It wasn't something that a normal person would say. You died, or you got arrested. Like, isn't that enough? And so I went to that appointment, and I first started off. I said, I have to tell you guys something. And I looked at Mike and I said, I've been using for 5 months. And he looked at me and he said, it's about time.
Yep.
No S word. And he had known. And he just sat there and he just sat there. And it wasn't like he was trying to take my money. He just he was a recovering junkie by himself. He knew that there wasn't anything, that he could say. And so that was, I don't know, November 3rd, 1994. Next day I went into treatment. No, it was November 2nd, 1994. Next day I went into treatment. And I've been sober ever since.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How old were you then?
I was 21.
Yeah, it's funny because as a counselor, I have this kind of the saying of, it's your story, tell it any way you want. I'm just here listening, because when a person's not ready, they're not ready.
Right. And that's the secret behind recovery. And whether it's, we've talked about it before, there's so many different paths to recovery, but the path is a path of wanting it. You have to want to be on that path. It's not a path of need, right? That path of need doesn't go very far. I mean, how many people do we all know that, like, from the outside, you're like, man, that guy is an alcoholic or that guy's an addict, but need will never get you sober. Yeah. Want will get you sober.
The only thing I think that people say that I don't fully agree with is when they say they have to want it enough. Where I think that's another way of saying, like, just pull yourself up. If you really want it, you'll really do it. If a person wants it, at least, I think if they get with the right people, they can begin to find a way to make it.
I totally agree with you. But for me, the want is, I have to want to do. I have a terminal disease. Yeah. So I have to want every day to do something so I don't go into remission. Right? I have to want to, if I have a thought of drinking or using, that I have to play, I want to play the movie all the way through. Sure. Right? And I just don't, because how many times before, whether it was a relapse or whatever, there'd be a thought, like, I want to get high, and there'd be an action. Yeah. Right? And there wasn't any window in between there. So, the want isn't necessarily self-will for me. It's just a want to not have to live my life like that anymore, and it's a daily thing. It's not something you just say. I said, November 3rd, 1994. I want this. I'm good. It's a daily, reminder of myself.
Absolutely, I try to tell people. Part of why I'm a big proponent of getting recovery more in the mainstream, more in the limelight, where it becomes more of a normal thing to have a conversation about, other than, I have to stay anonymous to the point where no one knows I'm in it. Now, I agree in anonymity, I don't want to get out there and tell everybody everything. Yeah, definitely the anonymity in the rooms and all that, but sometimes that carries over into life where we feel like we can't talk to the people closest, to us about our recovery. And what I say to the men I work with is, recovery is hard as hell. Right. And the sooner you grasp that every single day you're going to battle.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think one thing that recovery is so hard is because life is so hard.
Life is just hard.
Right.
Absolutely.
I mean, life, we all have, our cross to bear. We all have, life isn't just because you got sober, right? Life is still life. And life is going to send you curveballs, and life is going to, but it's just how you show up for your life. Right. And instead of, like I said in the beginning, instead of going around problems, I go through them, and it's still foreign to me. Almost 26 years later, like, I'm not processed, or I'm not made for process. I'm not made for, like, I know, even though I've had so much experience in my life of getting through to the other side, and being a more evolved spiritual person because I had to go through that, I'm still, my first reaction is like, okay, what can I do? What can I take? Like, how can I get out of this? How can I feel better quicker? And that's not, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. And there's no timeline.
How about your family? You good family?
Oh, I'm great. Yeah. I have an older brother who I think we're probably at 13 years of recovery.
He's in recovery too.
Yeah, I have four of us. Two of us sort of were hit with the bug, but both the grace of God, both of us are both sober. And my mom is great. I mean, she finally laid down, and I think that it's almost like my older brother I got the benefit of. Right, because I think the older brother sort of paves the way, and then I'm the second oldest, so that pathway was sort of paved, like been there, done that. Like, you got caught with beer. My older brother got caught with beer, or buying beer. When it happened to me, Mom was like, okay, this is just, I guess, being part of a team. But he kind of got the short end of the stick because she learned what tough love meant with me, I guess, 10 years earlier or whatever, however many years more. So when it came time for him, which helped. I mean, at the end of the day, it got him, sober, I think easier.
Sure.
So he kind of got the short end of the stick. And I have a, younger brother, a younger sister. Everybody lives in San Francisco. I'm the only one who lives outside of San Francisco, but we're a really close unit. I mean, we're blessed. Right. We're blessed.
Was your father around?
He was around. It's another part of my story that it was the 80s, and divorce had one outcome, and it was War of the Roses, famous 80s movie. But my parents had a high conflict divorce, and for me it was hard because I was in my teenage years, and for any kid it's hard, but when you have to sit there and hear a parent talking about the other parent, and if anybody else were talking about your parent like that, you punch them in the face.
Sure.
But you just sort of learn to swallow it.
Yeah.
Which is for me anyways, for a guy, like that's how I'm conditioned, right? But that didn't help, and it didn't go anywhere. And so, but my dad was around. It was just a different kind of being around. Like I played sports, and he wasn't coming to my games, but when they got divorced, he was outside my house every morning to pick me up, to drive me to school before I got my license. So he was there.
Sure.
He's still there, and he's he's just a complicated guy. And he grew up in a different generation, but I think at least I've tried to the best of my ability, and I still have some qualities of him in me, but and at least for me, and I think a lot of people in my generation, we have overcompensated as far as being a parent, and we'll see what that consequences are. But the hovering, the helicoptering, worried about the feelings, when we had none of that, right? So we've like everything, we sort of overcompensated. I know I have. And so, but my dad is still alive. My mom's still alive. For whatever reason, now they're best friends. But it is what it is. So it's nice.
Well, let me ask you this, because I'm really interested in what people that are in long-term recovery think about some of the kind of the hot topics. Why do you think you became an addict? You've obviously done a lot of work. You talked about the kindergarten thing, but your brother also became an addict.
Yep.
So what do you think in your story?
It's funny because I have been around a lot. The hereditary thing. There's nature versus nurture.
There's all that.
To me, it's I know is it's a disease, and it's a deadly disease, and I know that because I've been around long enough to see friends die. I've been along long enough to see people commit suicide, and to me, that's all I need to know, right? And I think that I became an addict because I just never felt a part of, and then I found, look, drugs and alcohol work. And that's the one thing they never told me, right? Nancy Reagan, just say no, was what I grew up with in the 80s.
I'm the same, there with you.
And then I tried it.
Yeah.
But what they didn't tell me is that it works.
Yeah.
It works. I mean, you see it when people have a couple of drinks at a cocktail party.
Sure.
They feel loose. They feel better. They've let down their hair, or smoke a joint or whatever it is, like, or take a Xanax. What they work. The problem is they stop working, right? And then then it becomes problems, and then you just keep on spinning the wheel. So I think that's one thing that for whatever gene or whatever I have inside me or whatever hole, if I try to put a title to it or a name to it, or try to say that it's hereditary, like I'm not a doctor, I didn't study it, I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, so like to me it doesn't really matter, except for that I know in my heart of hearts it's a disease.
That's cool.
And it's a disease, it's a mental disease. It's a disease of the mind, because I've seen so many people. My mom's a normie. Like, she smells liquor and she gets drunk. Okay. Or she gets a little tipsy. So she doesn't really even drink. But if I told my mom that, or a doctor told my mom that she was allergic to strawberries and she would die if she ate a strawberry, I bet you everything I have in my life that if she went to a restaurant, if she went past the strawberry aisle, she wouldn't eat any fruit around the strawberries, and she would ask the waiter if the dish had been cooked, right? Just overprotective, overcautious. I'm allergic to strawberries. I eat a strawberry, I'm gonna die. Yeah. And alcoholics and addicts like me all over the world are allergic to strawberries, and yet we try to rationalize. Maybe it's the outside of the strawberry. Yeah. Maybe it's the Sonoma Farms or whatever it is. Maybe it's just that type of strawberry. I'm going to try the ones from Brazil. So it's just like this. So to me, that's a disease. Sure.
Why do you think? Okay, so alcoholism legally became a disease in 1952. Yep. Something like that, 52, 54. Anyways, in the 50s, early 50s. Why do you think today people still don't call it a disease?
It's so interesting. I just had this conversation with this addiction doctor, specializes in, and now they've gone as far as the what's it called, the DHM, or the diagnostic, the use therapist, or it's not even called alcoholism addiction anymore. It's called substance abuse disorder. Yeah, and so, and I had this conversation with him that it's the most important thing that I do. That I acknowledge I'm an alcoholic, and I acknowledge an addict, because otherwise, I have amnesia. I could, if I don't, maybe it won't happen overnight, right? But over a period of time, I'll forget about it, or I'll forget about, how bad it was, and then I'll have that thought, God forbid, and there'll be no buffer, there'll be no time between the thought and the action, right? And I'll be like, how did I get here again? So. Yeah, it is. I use it a lot. The idea behind the AIDS, right? Yeah. When AIDS came out, it was the gay cancer. It was a lifestyle choice. And then heterosexuals started getting it, and women started getting it, and all of a sudden it wasn't that way, right? And I think that one of the things about drug addiction and alcoholism is one, it affects so many people, because there are, I think, 40 million people who suffer in this world, and from the family unit, how many families or how many people does that spread out and touch? Yeah. And so unfortunately, and I say this with apathy, the white kids in suburbia are dying. Right. So now it's a problem. Now it's America's problem. Right. Now it's an epidemic. Yeah. But guess what? It's been an epidemic. Exactly. And whether it was speed, crack, whatever it is, like in 20 years we weren't talking about opioids. We're just talking about something else. So it's just a cycle. Like, it's going to be something else. Right. So, but at least, look, if something good can come out of it, right? And I hope it follows the same track as. Sort of the AIDS or some other diseases where people thought it was a lifestyle choice until, like, it's not your problem until it's your problem. Right. Yeah. And until you've been touched by it. And so I just think breaking through the stigma, breaking through this idea that it's a lifestyle choice. Yes, I made a choice to pick up heroin, right? Like, that's not my disease's fault. Right. But I also, if I have a bad heart, and I make bad lifestyle choices, right? And my doctor says, you can't eat this, you got to exercise, and I do none of that. It's a disease. I die. I died of a heart attack. You didn't die of a lifestyle choice, right? So it's one thing that I bang my head against the wall. We talk about the radio show, and I think after you called that day, or maybe it was the next week, because we did for National Recovery Week. But some people were calling up and questioning whether it was a disease. Yeah. And they're saying it was a lifestyle choice, and it just takes education. I think it just takes people willing to open up and talk about it. If they feel comfortable.
Sure. And
sharing the success stories, right? Like, I would consider myself today to be a relatively success story in my recovery, right? And in 26 years, I haven't lied. Well, that's not true. I haven't stolen. I try to be a somewhat decent member of society.
Yeah.
I pay my taxes. I work. I have a family. And all these bounties that I've gotten because of my recovery. But you roll back the clock, and I was just a degenerate, headed for nowhere. Headed, costing society, whether it's in jail, institutions, or, whatever it is, because I used to just steal and do whatever I could. So, if that's not a miracle, I don't know what is.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, your path was the 12 steps, right? I read on somewhere about you online that your favorite book is the Big Book, which is common for a lot of people that do the AA thing, but is it literally your favorite book?
No, my favorite, I think
because I was like, I got some other books that are really interesting.
No. But I think it was my favorite possession.
Okay.
And one thing that I did, when I got my first job and I started making a little money, is there's a bunch of editions of the Big Book.
Yeah.
And I went out and I looked for years to try to find a first edition, first printing of the Big Book.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's one of like 450 books that they first did. And so that was I think the question was, what's your favorite possession? And so that, if I have to be materialistic, that's it. And you know what I was really disappointed about? I thought for as much money as it cost me at the time that I was going to find something new out. Reading it.
Really?
Same program.
There's
a couple minor tweaks through the years, and the stories are a little different at the end, but it's pretty much the same book.
Yeah.
So I was expecting, like, if I pay all this money, I want some spirit. I want
something good, light to shine down.
But it is. At the end of the day, it's probably the one book I've read the most. Not probably, by far.
Yeah.
It's the most book I've taken men through it. I've read out loud with men, and there's a connection there. Which I'm sure you've had that experience with, and once, that's not in our nature. It's not in my nature to let down, read a book with a guy, right?
Very true.
But having having that person want to listen to my story and listen to my experience, and it's a manual. For me, it's a manual for living, and it's not that complicated. It's a little outdated, but but at the end of the day, it's probably still as relevant, back in the 40s as it is today.
Yeah, I got a question, and if you don't want to answer it, we can cut this part out of the video. But or maybe you don't feel quick to answer it. But obviously, I'm in the middle of writing a book, and I'm doing a lot of research and honestly, I had never really thought too much about it, but I keep coming across a lot of people that bash 12 steps. They bash AA, which is, I really never thought that much about it, but now doing research, it's like, I was even listening to a few neuroscientists, and they're like, like Rich Roll. You ever listen to Rich Roll? He's not a neuroscientist, but he's a podcast guy and talks about that type of stuff, and he's in AA. And he's like, man, people just want to bash AA. Why do you think that is?
I think, okay, so here's my experience. When I got to AA, it was a God program. It was a religious program.
Really?
Yeah. In my head.
Okay.
In my mind. And it was a cult. And so I went in there, because the first.
Not all cults are bad.
Yeah, right. But so just the ones that make you just makes one that make you wear Nikes and drink Kool-Aid. So I had this story in my head, right? And so with my first rehab, they made us go to meetings in the little white van, and all I heard was God, God, so blah blah blah, God. So I was listening from that perspective, and so every time I heard the word God, I said, "See, I told you so. You're right, Ben. It's a religious program." And then,
I take it you didn't want any part of it.
I didn't want any part of it.
Okay.
I was a recovering Jew at that point, That's about the only thing I did well in recovering at that point was Judaism. And so then I came back and I had that moment in the mirror and I had that moment with Mike and I came back and I still would go to these meetings and I would still hear God and I still get uncomfortable. And I was at this meeting and a guy. I was at the meeting and I just got myself feeling so hot and I said, I'm just going to go outside and have a cigarette. And I went outside and I had a cigarette and a guy named Kevin O'Malley came up to me, a little short guy, glasses, just, and he looked at me straight in the eye and said, you're going to die. And I said, who the F are you?
Right.
I go, are you the God that they're talking about in there, that you know everything? And, I was just a punk. And he goes, after I said, what are you, the God? And he goes, you've got a problem with the God, don't you? I said, yeah, I have a problem with the God. And he said, well, and this is the turning point of my sobriety, and I still talk to the guy, he's still sober, he's like 50 plus years of sobriety. He said, this is not a religious program, it's a spiritual program. And I said, well, what's the difference?
What's the difference, right?
And he simply just said spirituality, religion is for people trying not to get to hell, and spirituality is for people who've been there and try not to get back. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was just like, bam. That was the moment. Everybody has their sort of moment. So, but I think the thing about AA, and some people it's for, some people it's not.
Sure.
And a lot of the times it's not because it doesn't work for people. It's like if you go on reviews of, I would think the hardest business to be in would be a rehab, right?
Yeah.
Because especially now with Google reviews.
Yeah.
Because if you get a bad review, that obviously didn't work for people. So Alcoholics Anonymous wants to blame everybody else, right? Mm-hmm. It's their fault, right? The reason I stay sober because AA doesn't work.
Yeah.
But to me, it's worked, and to me, but it's just not AA. It's the principles, right? It's the steps, and I think if you strip it all down and don't give it labels, right? Don't call it AA or don't call it Celebrate Recovery or don't call it religion. It all teaches the same thing,
right?
Right? It's about being honest. It's about not, letting go of the reins. And it's about showing up for your life and cleaning up your side of the street. Yeah. And so that's what religion teaches. That basically the foundation of all religion is really the same thing. I'm not a religious scholar, but I would imagine they all say be honest, show up, trust, and faith higher than yourself. Something other than yourself. Whether that's and I feel the same way. And whether it's an uppercase G or a lowercase G. It doesn't matter. It's just something other than yourself.
Right. But when you went through the 12 steps, that obviously you still do. So how do you do that? How does somebody who's not necessarily a God thinker, follower, whatever, use for a higher power?
So after that conversation with Kevin, he got me. Whatever he said, he didn't get punched in the face, which at that point in my life was like, okay, this guy's okay. He passes the next level. He said, you want to go to coffee? And we didn't go back in the meeting. We went to coffee, and we had a spiritual conversation about God. And he said, let me just pull out the steps and say, and so you can see what it says now that you're not listening from just perspective of God. Follow the next sentence, and the next sentence is, found a God as you understood him. Wherever it says God in the 12 steps, it says as you understand him. So I looked at him and said, so as I understand him, so I can call my God Chewbacca? And he said, yes. So the first year, my God was Chewbacca.
And you got sober with Chewbacca.
I got sober with Chewbacca. And then it evolved, right? And then it evolved into an idea for me of an understanding of, as cheesy as it sounds, the acronym, God, good, orderly direction. Right, so that was something other than myself making decisions for my life, because I've realized that all the decisions I've made in my life have gotten me to where I am. Yeah. So I had to let go. One of the things that I remember talking to a race car driver, and I'd always wanted to know, that camera that they have inside of the thing, and when they crash and they're in the spin, they let go of the wheel. Yeah. I said, why do you guys let go of the wheel, right? And he goes, because anything I can do from that point on is only going to make the situation worse. Right. I'm in a tailspin. I can't control. I'm not going to be able to get that car to do anything other than what it wants to do. So it's just to let go.
Right.
And have faith. You know, that wherever this is going to end up, it's going to end up, and there's nothing I can do. All I can do is make it worse.
Yep.
And so for me, the good orderly direction is, you know, the rooms, my sponsor, my friends, and not understand that my decisions are holding onto that wheel.
Yeah.
And trying to make it worse. So it's been an evolution for me. You know, I probably, if I'm honest, the first 10 years, I kind of got that sick stomach, feeling in my stomach, saying the word God at a group level.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, now I say it, no problem. You know, I do still, you know, even little G, big G, like it's still a little flippant. It's still a little like, but I do have faith. You know, I do have faith because I shouldn't be here right now.
Right.
You know, I shouldn't be here, and I'm still here because I shouldn't say I've let go of the wheel the whole time, because when I do get on the wheel is when all stuff, you know, hits the fan.
Right.
You know, in a bad way in my life.
Yeah, I you know, it's interesting because they say, you know, when people relapse, it's often because either things went really bad or really good. So it's an interesting contrast about how, like, why does a person relapse when things go really good? You know, whether they're not ready to handle it or it just becomes too much.
It's the same reason I think that why, you know, with mental health, right? And people go and they get doctors and they get help and they get the medication they need. I don't know how many times you've heard about people who've stopped taking their meds because they feel better.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that alcoholism, addiction, call it, you know, substance abuse disorder, just call it not wired correctly. When we feel better, I don't need to go to meetings anymore.
Right.
I don't need to do what I got this thing. This is not a curable disease. At least I don't know any program that teaches that it's curable.
Right.
It's definitely treatable. But I think that's the same reason, you know, when it's good is, I'm going to stay home with my wife tonight and not go do my commitments or do my thing, you know, and you just get sort of, you know, it's like stop at taking your meds, not realizing that the meds or the meetings or helping somebody else is the reason your life is so good. And I've been through that period of my life. You know, I've been in my period of my life where things were great. I stopped going to meetings. I stopped, you know, doing what I was supposed to do as much. And the results were not good.
They were not good.
They were not good. I mean, you know, the dry drunk, the whole thing, you know, I was married and, you know, I was going through dry drunk. And look, I ended up wrecking that marriage.
That's actually where I was going to go next was, you know, the good side, okay, success, everything's great, people fail. The bad side, how do you go through a dark side without relapsing? I only bring it up because you wrote a successful book on the happy marriage. And I'm interested, how did that even come about in your recovery?
Well, and I just want to say it's one of those things that, again, looking back is a lot easier hindsight, right, than when you're going through it. Because when you're trudging that road to happy destiny, like, why?
Yeah, I went through a divorce, and I'm not ready to write a book called Happy Divorce.
Yeah, right. So the short story is that we moved here to Tampa. I got to start going to meetings, and all of a sudden, like, the addict alcoholic mind started looking for the differences again. And that's another thing I think people, at least I was doing at the beginning, is I was sitting there in my mind. If I could have thought bubbles, people would think I was the biggest dick in the world. But I probably was. But, you know, like you'd be sharing about how, you had to go to jail for 3 months. And my immediate response was like, that guy's messed up. Like, I haven't done that, right? And so immediately I started going to these meetings, and and I didn't even really recognize it, but looking back on it, I did. But that like they're doing meetings here differently. Like they're not talking about, the steps are still the same on the wall, and everything was still the same, but the format was different though. So I just they don't do AA right in Tampa, so I'm gonna stop going, right? And so I slowly, it was a progressive thing, just like my disease, and this dry drunkenness, or this, pulling away from my spiritual connection, or unhooking from my spiritual connection, was subtle.
Right.
And then I started focusing on work, and I started focusing on other things to fill this spiritual void that the spiritual connection had filled. Where I have a spiritual problem, right? I was trying to find the chemical solution to that spiritual problem with drugs and alcohol. And then I tried to find the monetary solution to the chemical problem, or to the spiritual problem, and trying to find everything else, right? Women and all this other stuff. Meanwhile, my wife and I just started growing distant apart, and we reached a point where we just couldn't continue. But where I was in my life, and that's the dry drunk or practicing alcohol. It's all somebody else's fault.
Right.
So my disease was in full effect. Although I wasn't drinking and using,
it still was in effect.
Full effect. It was my ex-wife's fault. If only she had done this. If only she hadn't done that. So I left angry, bitter, resentful. I was out for blood. She was a fraud. And I was going to show the whole world. And I went out and I, could find the best lawyer I could possibly find, and sat down with him, and he was, my best friend. And he's like, yeah. We're gonna get her. We're gonna get her. And so I wrote him a check, and like a week later, I got a War and Peace. I mean, it was like that thick of a game plan of exactly what I wanted to accomplish, right? And I had it in my backpack for a while, and I hadn't pulled it out, and I was on a red eye back from L.A. And I pulled it out, and I started reading it, and I got like 2 pages into it. And talking about a burning bush, a spiritual awakening. I just got this. For the first time in years of my life, I could see who I was, and I could see from the outside, looking at this person who wasn't the person I wanted to show up for my life in. And but I also had awareness enough to remember what it was like. And this is the crazy thing about divorce, and this is the crazy thing about relationships, right? It pushes all of the FU buttons we have as men, romance and finance.
Yeah.
So even all the stuff that I had gone as a kid with my parents' divorce, I was going to willingly put not willingly, but I was going to put my son through the same thing. And I knew where that path ended. So I got right 2 pages into it, and I just got this thing, and I said, I can't do this.
Yeah.
I've lost connection with the person that I want to be. And so I called a lawyer on Monday and said I was going to find a different route. And then I called Nikki, my ex-wife, on the same right after, and said, look, I just need some time. We need to put the pause button on this divorce, and I need to deal with some emotional stuff.
She's like, it's about time.
Yeah, right. No, pretty much. She said, look, take as much time as you want. And there wasn't like I made it clear that our marriage has ended, and she agreed. But I just said, look, we're about to get in some rough waters.
Yeah.
This is where, speaking of cults, these are the water, and this is where divorce is so traumatic and goes so bad sometimes, because those waters, when people decide to get divorced, are where cults are born, where religious extremists recruit, where shark lawyers live, because it's desperation.
Yeah.
Right? I was desperate. I was willing to write that guy whatever money he wanted because he was going to tell me exactly what I wanted to hear. So, I went and I just got back to basics, man. I just got back to going back to meetings and swallowing my pride and opening up and being honest with other men, about what I was going through. And I went through and I did another inventory around, my marriage and the way I'd been showing up in my life. And then I read it to my sponsor. And I got about halfway through that thing. And I was like, you know what? I wouldn't want to be married to you either. I said, I was a miserable person.
Yeah.
And so then, after a couple of, about 6 weeks, I called Nikki and I said, can we go to coffee? And we went to coffee, and I'm such an asshole. I'm sorry. It was such a
it's okay.
jerk.
We can say asshole around here.
Such a that I didn't tell her what it was about. I said, "Can we go to coffee?" And it wasn't intentional because I obviously was meaning to clean up my side of the street. But when we were writing the book, like, it hit me that I didn't I was cryptic about it. So all she knew was angry, bitter, like F you, Ben, who had left the house 6 weeks earlier. So she's like driving to coffee. She writes in the book, she's like driving to coffee. She's like, I don't know what I'm walking into here.
Right.
And so, I sat her down and I had, her coffee waiting that I knew she liked, and we sat outside at Starbucks, and I just said, I love you, and I said, I went through it, and I said, I've done some work myself, and I just want to say I'm sorry, for the man that I, was, and the husband I was, and the father that I wasn't. Because I learned all this stuff about myself because I was finally willing to be honest with myself, and that's that's I think what it comes down to in recovery, whether it's Joe's Sober Club or whatever, Celebrate Recovery, whatever. It's just about being honest, and she then in turn, said she was sorry too. Wow, which is mind shatter, shape shifting. If you know Nick and I, we joke. I think it's the only time we apologize to each other, right? So,
during the divorce,
during the marriage, at the divorce, and even today, 14 years later. But it was the best time, and it was one of those times where there was, it didn't all of a sudden snap and everything was fine. But we had left the past in the past at that moment, right? And we had that didn't mean it didn't come up, and there was buttons hadn't been pushed, but I think as human beings, we all have the right, the capability, and the capacity to be happy. But that doesn't happen in the past. And that doesn't happen in the future. No. But it happens. And right there at that coffee shop, for the first time in a while, Nikki and I were living in the present. We weren't, living on, if only she did this, if only he did this. He should have done that. He should have, And so we dealt with the emotional side of the divorce first, right? And I think, and this is going to sound apathetic purposely, but divorce is just a business deal.
Yeah.
Right? You're splitting up assets, you're making decisions on life, you're just sort of, but the problem is it's wrapped in emotional, like the worst emotional buttons people have, and fear and resentment and anger and ego and all that stuff. Insecurity. Name all of them.
Yeah, right? They're all in there.
They're all in there. And they're sprinkled with Miracle Grow too. Yep. Right? And so, but we were able to do that side of it first, and then handle the business side of it.
Yeah, too many people try to do the practical first.
Right, and then you're making decisions for all the wrong reasons because you're doing it out of spite, you're doing it out of anger, you're doing it out of hurt ego and all that stuff, and that doesn't mean that our divorce, right after that coffee shop, was okay. Let's write a book. Right, let's do that. It's happy now, but it was.
I kind of wondered. I was like, wow.
No, it was. There was a lot of. Fake it until we made it. There was a lot of times where for her, I started dating my wife and she started dating her husband. And there was just, even though we had cleaned up the emotional side of the past the best we could, in divorce, there are landmines everywhere.
Right.
And you're going to step on them. There's no way of avoiding it. Whether it's dating somebody else, whether it's, dealing with the financial part of it, whether it's whatever it is. There's landmines everywhere.
Especially when a kid's involved.
Especially when there are kids involved. But so the next meeting we had at the coffee shop was sort of just top level. And I said, do you have a problem with joint custody, 50-50, everything? And she said, absolutely not. She said, you're his father, and I want you to have as much time as I have with them. And I go, Nikki, we'll work out all this other stuff.
Yeah. And
we were actually able to sit down and work out our settlement at the same coffee shop, the Starbucks on Beta Bay, outside, same table, over 8-9 meetings. And look, she had her lawyers, I had my lawyers, but the thing is, they're two teams, but we were on each other's team, and we were took control of our divorce, right? Like lawyers, you pay lawyers,
sure,
they work for you. You pay financial accountants or whatever. Forensic account, they work for you, and so we worked out the deal. We would talk in between, and then we'd come back. But it was just so, I shouldn't say easy. It was easier letting us be on each other's team.
What's interesting is, I'm just sitting here thinking about this, is walking with men in recovery through divorces. If you get a guy that's not there at that self-actualized place where he can step outside and see himself being an asshole or not, you get the guy that's either going to be like totally like, I'm taking her for everything, but it's actually all his own brokenness that still isn't dealt with. But there's a flip side to that, and that's the guy that's just like, I'm just going to give her everything. because I know I'm so bad and I'm so awful that she can just have everything. And you're almost like, don't do that either, because you're going to wake up one day and be like, what the hell did I do?
Right.
So it's like there's a healthy midway.
There's exactly a healthy but it's about fairness, and it's about doing the right thing. Right.
Well, that's in the divorce, but I mean, as the guy in recovery, walking with a dude in recovery or female, whatever, he's got to be mentally in that right place,
and he has to be, and
with himself.
That's why the emotional side of it has. I mean, that's what if we look again. We're not doctors. We're not lawyers. We're just sharing the divorce. A happy divorce is just our personal experience, right? And a lot of it was we didn't know. As crazy as it sounds, and that there was no social media. Back then, I mean, there's MySpace, but there wasn't divorce support groups or divorce coaches or any of that stuff on MySpace. And now there's a whole world, right? But so we just sort of figured this thing out, and I guess that because of the foundation of recovery I had, it was about owning up and owning your actions.
Sure.
And it wasn't our son's choice for us to meet. It wasn't our son's choice for us to get married.
Right.
It wasn't our son's choice to have him, and it surely wasn't his choice for us to get divorced.
Right.
So why should he have to face? Why should he be stuck with the emotional bill, right?
Yeah.
For our choices.
Yeah.
And again, everything happens in God's world for a reason. And why did I have to go through my parents' divorce, and why did I have to go through all that crap as a kid? Maybe so I didn't have to repeat the same mistakes as my parents did.
Sure.
And so that's, I think one of the things that, people hold on to so much is the romance and finance, right? And all bad decisions are based when those buttons are being pushed, right? Especially for men.
Yeah.
And I don't want to give up this money, right? Because she didn't earn it. But at the end of the day, I tell people who I talk to or going through it is like, how old are you? And they say, 42, 43, whatever, however old. How many years more do you have to earn? Like how much? Like let's narrow the lens or widen the lens a little bit. You're just like stuck here in yourself and thinking about how much you're gonna have to give or whatever. But would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? Right. And that's the thing that I literally had to tell myself. Nikki started dating a guy that we knew. They met, they connected after, but. I remember one day, and I always tell a story because this is the mindset that I had, and when I talk about fake it, don't make it, is I was coaching Asher's baseball team, Little League, and after a game, Chad, Nikki's husband's now, and her were at the game, and Nikki and I had been talking, and I knew that they were dating, and she told me that he was coming to the game, and after the game, the parents are together, and Asher runs over and gives Chad a big hug, and he, gives Nikki a hug, and I sort of sauntering over there, going, "Oh my God, this is gonna be the worst thing ever. Just smile. Not about you. This is about your son. Put on your big boy pants and put on a smile." And I did. Probably was the most awkward smile I've ever.
Sort of like a crooked smile.
But the first thing I did was I went over and I gave Chad a hug, and I gave Nikki a kiss, and I just want to let Asher know.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah. I didn't do that.
Yeah.
I screwed mine up.
Yeah.
It wasn't his story. It's all like thought out. It's like intelligent. It's mature. I was in detox when my wife and I got divorced, or I think we may have gotten divorced a little bit before that. Actually, I was in my first detox when she married her new husband. That's a good time, by the way. Totally good time.
That helps the detox.
You're in your first detox.
You got a broken heart. You're like your ego's being hurt.
Yeah, I'm going to lose my son to this other man. Yeah, that it definitely was not the way to do it. Your way was much better. But I unfortunately didn't, obviously a lot of my divorce was around my addiction.
Right.
So it wasn't after. The reason I got sober was for my son. This is what I always say. It's like, I finally got to the point where I needed to be in his life. And so he was the catalyst to get me sober. I met Jesus eventually, and Jesus kept me sober, but it was my son. It was that decision, sitting in that detox, being like, she's about to marry our neighbor. I knew the guy. Like, they were together as soon as I left the house. I'm never going to get back to that.
Right.
And my life is totally a mess. And I don't even know if this recovery thing's going to work. So I can't exactly go plead my case because I'm not even sober yet.
Right.
And so, I had to kind of tough it up. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in that moment, to be, in that first detox, first rehab, and, your ex is coming home with her new husband.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, look, I'd be lying to you. 14 years later, we live 7 houses apart. We go on family vacations all the time. We, put out a Christmas card, Our Happy Divorce Christmas card. Been doing it for 5 years of all of us together.
Yeah.
My daughter is with Chad today at work, Nikki's husband.
Okay.
And yet, about a month ago, Asher comes in and he goes, "Hey, Chad and I are going down to the Keys fishing." And Asher, our son's a huge he loves to fish.
Mm-hmm.
And my first reaction is like, ooh.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's look. I'm a man.
I'm a dude, man.
I'm full of ego.
Yeah.
But it that doesn't mean it's real, right?
That's important.
That's the ego, right? And one thing that Nikki and I were able to do is drop the ego.
Yeah.
Right. And so it just comes a little easier now. Just like I was walking over there to hug Chad.
Yeah.
Like I had to talk myself off the cliff. It's not about you.
Right.
Drop the ego. Put on your big boy pants. This isn't about you. You brought this kid into this world, right? And so, the playing the movie all the way through is a little easier. Like, yeah, I get that gut punch, but I can identify that's just ego. What a great opportunity that Asher and Chad, who is a second dad to him, get to spend that time together.
Yeah.
And I know Nikki goes the same thing when my wife puts Asher to sleep, or when he was little, he put her to sleep. So it's still an ego thing.
Yeah.
But that's that's the first thing. But I think that the poor thing that you brought up is your son. You did it for your son, and I think we obviously did the divorce, and but it comes down to singleness of purpose.
Yeah.
And I think that when I have that in my life, and I have that whether it's getting sober, I think one of the greatest things about AA or 12-step programs or any recovery or group setting is that there's singleness of purpose, right? It's not a political, it's not socioeconomic, it's not anything except for whatever that group's about, right? Mental health or getting sober or Christ or whatever, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And we had singleness of purpose with our son.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. That's it. Like we put him here.
Sure.
And we're determined not to hand him with emotional bill.
How long have you been sober at that point?
Yeah, see, that's the other thing you broke. So funny. Thanks for coming back. But everybody, since we've been doing this book, people are talking, and I talk about my disease. They said, "So did you get sober? Is that?" And I wish I had that excuse, right? I mean, it's almost like, no, actually, I was 12 years sober at the time,
Wow.
And so it's just so funny because everybody asks that question. But
it's a reasonable question.
It's a definitely reasonable question, but it just shows you that much damage can be done, and it's not the drinking and the drugging. Mm-hmm. The disease that's just a symptom.
Yeah.
And so, if I don't have that spiritual connection, then I'm not hooked up. I will look for other things to hook up, spiritual connection to try to fill that spiritual hole.
I heard something the other day that is I do get into a lot of, like I said before, these neuroscientists that are investigating different things in the brain and how it all works out with the reward system. But there was a study done in Stanford University did a study on Berkeley did a study on a college did a study on like a daycare or whatever and they took out of all these kids that were at daycare, they found the ones that like to paint every single day. And maybe you've heard about this, but they pulled the ones that like to paint every single day at playtime aside, and they started giving them gold stars at the end of each day. So they'd paint a painting, and at the end of the day, they'd be like, "Here's a gold star, great job." And they did it for an extended period of time. And then one day they stopped giving the gold stars to see what would happen. And lo and behold, those kids stopped painting.
Really?
Because their brain adjusted to the
rewards.
external reward.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, and I'm going to be hammering this home to everybody I counsel, but that external reward is damning to us in recovery. And it's so easy to fall victim to that. It's like, I said on the radio show when they asked how long do I think it takes a guy's brain to heal and be, and on average it's 3 years. And I try to tell the men that come in here, we're open-ended because we expect you to stay multiple years because it takes that long before you stop making really stupid decisions. Okay? We take mostly guys that have been in and out of 15 programs, so they've done the deal. They're not first-timers. And in the problem with, like, when it comes to things like women, jobs, cars, apartments, is they're all external. And telling these guys as soon as they walk in the door was, I'm not even going to consider letting you talk to a girl until 12 months. And then you're going to have to talk to all of us to figure out if you're even close to being ready. But I'm a man, I need companionship. I'm like, yeah, you're an addict who needs companionship because you're codependent. That's totally different.
Or instant gratification.
Yeah, instant gratification. But it's that external reward that we can become so accustomed to that it just slides in there. And we don't even know that it's there. But if we don't learn to turn to our inner self, right, and let the rewards that we seek after come from inside of us, we won't make it in recovery. We won't. And that's why 12 Steps has the 12th step. That's why Christian, I make disciples. I try to help men, follow Jesus and transform their life. But it's internally, there's a reward from that because it's something bigger than me, outside of me, that I can't be bought, can't be manipulated to get, can't be lied to get, all that. And it's so important, like, for us in recovery to finally see, like, what it means to truly know what internal rewards mean to us. In the beginning, it was my son. Now it's other men and other women and their wives. But if, the moment that I'm like, I just want to make some more money. I can make some more money. I can just go get more donors, and I want a nicer car. And here's a funny story. A couple months ago, before I totally bottomed out in life, I drove a Harley. In fact, I had to sell my Harley because I went into debt and all that. And I always said, one day I'm going to get a Harley back. And so for whatever reason, over the last 5 months, I decided I want to get a Harley. Now, I don't make any money. I don't have any money. I don't even know anybody with any money. So that's kind of like not a possibility. But beyond that, to mentally start obsessing about that really took me out of where I am. I started, I started struggling with, things I hadn't struggled with in like a long time, and not alcohol or drugs per se, but addictive behaviors that all of a sudden it's like, whether it's lust or porn or whatever, it's like all these things that, like, wait a minute, I cleaned up my street. Why are they tempting me again? And I'm like, it's that damn Harley. I don't even have it.
Yeah.
I just want it.
Yeah.
And because I want it, it's taking my focus out of what's internal and putting it on the external.
Yeah. It was one thing you said about the external was when I got sober and was working with Kevin for a little bit, but then somebody else after, he told me I had to do something nice for somebody every day.
Yeah.
I was like, it's no problem, man. I can do that. But the catch was, I couldn't tell anybody.
Yeah.
And to me, like, I was like, okay, whatever. So, we meet, where I talk to him every day and go, did you do something nice? I go, yeah, you wouldn't believe what I did. He goes, I don't want to know.
Right.
You're not allowed to tell anybody. And then after a while, the exercise became clear, right? That it wasn't about, it was about doing something nice, but my reward system was spreading it, across the world about what I had done to get those.
Yes.
Oh, you're a great guy, Ben.
Yeah.
You did that, and then it took away from the selfless act that whatever I was doing, whether it was paying for somebody's coffee or something little. But I realized that about myself going through that exercise, that when I did something, it wasn't that I didn't do things nice, but the motivation behind it.
And that's actually in the Bible. If you didn't know that, it's like Jesus has a saying where he's like, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. So if you give to the poor, you can keep it from yourself. Because basically he knew then, 2,000 years ago, you're going to make it about you. And it's not about you. It's about helping the other person, but there's more to it than even that.
And there's, again, that's why there's so many similarities between whatever, like, spiritual path that I think that, right, if you strip it all down, all the all your wonderful books and the Bible or the Torah or the Quran, or if you take the label out of what it is, I think it's just showing up for your life, you know,
Yeah.
and all the other spiritual principles that we talked about.
Because I think all of those have to be the same because recovery is the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you could look at it through the lens of like, okay, all these, spiritually speaking, there's Buddhist principles in Christianity and vice versa and all these other things. But in recovery, I think there's a central theme that we have to live in recovered lives. And what path you choose to use is one thing, but the principles don't change. No. You can't go into recovery, tell somebody who's brand new in detox and be like, you just got to make life all about you and you'll be good. Just get ahead.
Right.
Capitalist recovery, let's call it. It's just slay everybody else.
Or just suck it up. Right?
Yeah,
don't talk about it. You'll be fine.
You'll be fine. You ever see Talladega Nights?
Yeah.
Stuff that down. Stuff that down. Man, way down. Stuff that down. I love that. So I want to kind of end on this. So I'm writing a book.
Yep.
And so the book is really, it's about, recovery, of course, and what I've experienced in my years of leading people. And plus in my own recovery of 14, 15 years now, my own experiences and the things I've learned and the things that I've seen people do wrong, if you will. Mm-hmm. Not like I know the way, but just things that haven't worked. And so the book is going to be based on, recovery seen through a new lens, where obviously I have the Ministry of the Sober Truth Project, which the idea behind it is the world needs to see recovery different around addiction, mental health, and suicide prevention. Where a lot of times it's like we want to see the issue. It's like see addiction different or mental health different or suicide prevention different, where if you actually know about it, it's right. You just got to learn the right thing. Right. It's kind of like we don't need to change addiction. It's a disease and other people need to know that. So the definition is right. People need to learn the definition. But if people knew the definition, they would understand that the recovery around these things is different. And I personally believe that recovery, if we had, you said you've studied the Portugal ways that they've went about changing addiction over there. And if you don't know what that is, look up Portugal and look at the changes they made in their system on the way they approach drug abuse and drug addiction. It's amazing. It's phenomenal stuff. But the whole concept of making an environment that is more empathetic and more welcoming instead of let's just throw everybody in jail.
Right.
And
how's that work?
How's that working for you? The war on drugs is a crop.
Yeah.
So
we lost.
We lost that a long time ago. So my thought is trying to help people understand that the recovery really is up to everybody, which is a far out there concept, but for so long we wanted to say that addict needs to just pull himself up, the person with mental health just to stay away from me, so on and so forth, or it's that family's problem or that community's problem, but I don't want to have anything to do with it. But what if it's not the individual's problem, but it's a shared society's problem?
Right.
And so instead of doing what I want to do for myself, I recognize that I need to do things different because people are in recovery around me. And it's mind-blowing to me how many people, how many families I talk to, and maybe even you the same, where they'll put their kid in and out of 20 rehabs, and they can't understand why they won't stay sober, and the kid finally gets sober for 90 days, and they get to go on a home visit, and the family's drinking at the time they're at the visit. Because, I'm not the alcoholic. And I just want to be have you learned nothing?
Right.
I get it. You don't want to stop drinking because this person's an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. But then don't complain when they come home and you're drunk as crap in front of them. There's
alcohol over there.
There's alcohol and they relapse. There's got to be an understanding here, people.
Nature and nurture.
Yeah, and we all have to. Yeah, there's a certain sacrifice that people that are in life with people that are in recovery have to make.
Yeah. And it's funny because I'm not. Yeah, I have a lot of AA friends. I have a lot of people in recovery friends. I have people who do go to the different pathways in recovery. My wife's in sobriety. She doesn't go to AA meetings, but she's found her own path. But I also hang out with people who drink alcohol and maybe do recreational drugs. I'm okay with that.
You got there,
but they would never
offer.
Or and look, this is something I don't talk about a lot, but there was a time when my wife right in my divorce where I had that thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I called a friend of mine who drinks, and I said, let's go drinking. And he said, buddy, go to a meeting. And he's never been to a meeting, right? He's never, but of course, he's one of my best friends. We have long conversations about it. And he drinks. And he goes, buddy, go to a meeting, call me after. If you want to go drinking, we'll go drinking. You know?
Yeah.
And sure enough,
Of course not.
So I build that net. That's probably why I'm so, maybe so open about it. So everybody around me knows that if I tell them, to go drink it and educate them too, mm-hmm. that's the nature, right? That's the surrounding my sobriety enough and protecting it enough. So if I do have that momentary lapse, where I don't have that, play the movie all the way through, no matter who I call in my life, are going to just say, know what to do, right? And so it's an important part that it's just, recovery is just not on the individual. Right. It's on the family, it's on the, it's a whole, universe.
We could get into the whole, like the whole Portugal philosophy, let's put our money towards better rehabs. And it's just, things need to change, I believe. Especially now with the coronavirus and more people falling into addiction and mental health issues than ever before. As a society, we're not gonna snap out of this right away. No. We have to change, or we're gonna see a lot of people that really destroy their lives.
Yeah, I mean, look, you see you turn on the news and you see the death toll and the numbers affected, and it's, no pun intended, but it's sobering, right? But imagine if they had the death toll and those afflicted with addiction. And look, I'm not comparing one disease to another. Like, I'm not here to say one, but this, before COVID or whatever, like, alcohol and drug addiction is the number one public health thing facing our country.
Absolutely.
Because it doesn't just affect the individual. It affects the whole family unit, society, medical world. I mean, the amount of money that it costs. You talk about jailing and institutions. Like, how much, if we repurpose that money towards getting people treatment or to getting people healthy, it would blow people's mind the amount of money that alcohol and drug addiction and mental health could cost society. But more importantly than money, like the family unit, the generational stuff, losing, kids, parents having to lose kids. Yeah. I mean, it's just not, but the silver lining is it's treatable. Yeah.
It really is.
It's a treatable disease.
But it takes an education for everybody that is surrounding. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, thus far, people haven't been willing, but we have to believe and hope that there's going to be a change coming.
I mean, look, I think that as far as, my limited time on this planet being sober, that I have seen a shift. Mm-hmm. I've seen, like, you just look at politicians now. I mean, not that that's the marker. Okay. Right? That's not the marker of, enlightenment, right? But they're talking about it on their stump speeches, right? They're talking about opioid, whatever it took, it's not something new. Like, a drug epidemic is not something new. We've talked about it earlier. But they're talking about it. Yeah. Right? They're passing bills. They're doing things for, Purdue Pharma, bankrupting the company, basically. Yeah. They made a lot of money in the meantime. But
you think?
I just think there is I wouldn't call it a drastic change. But when you start seeing politicians stoop on it, mm-hmm. or stump on it, whatever it's called, then at least we're getting it in
mainstream. It's going into the mainstream.
Yep.
So, and to me, it is hopeful in that sense. As somebody working in like a self-funded, self-raise the money, let us see the money.
Right, exactly.
It's like, okay,
show me the money,
and I'll get behind any politician that shows us the money to keep this place open.
Right.
And thus far, no one has really. Yeah. It's all been talk. And
the other thing about the thing is, people like you, who are just doing amazing work, I think it's going to take a lot of collaboration too between, because there's so many people trying to do such good work, and you're right. Not only politicians, but I sit on a couple nonprofit national boards that deal with alcohol and drug addiction, young people in recovery, and a couple others. But it's hard to raise money.
Yeah,
it's hard to raise money for this because. I need to find a different word, but a sobering moment was I was sitting in front of one of the richest men in America, and I had helped his son out, get sober and take sponsor him and do all that, and then I went back and I was on this board, the national board, which we're in a fundraising thing, and unfortunately his son stayed off of heroin, but started drinking again. And I was talking about this, nonprofit, and he declined to, give money, which is obviously his prerogative. But there's just at that point, this was probably 1998 or 99, but it just was at the moment, like, because this denial thing just doesn't go with the the person inflicted with the disease. Right. It's also the family.
Yeah.
And I think about writing a check or having his name as the lead, investor on this, it was like a $3 million campaign, meant something about him or his family.
Right.
And that's, that's sad.
It's very sad because the answer is going to come through collaboration.
Yeah, I think so.
But unfortunately, people thus far, I said something, I put it out there on Facebook, last week to even to Christians and said, you need to ask your pastor what the percentage of their budget goes towards mental health and addiction ministries. They don't have to go to mine, but do they go to other mental health and addiction ministries? Because chances are they don't. Chances are they go to kids getting food, kids getting this, single moms, all these things that are wonderful, beautiful things, don't get me wrong. But I believe that all other ministries submit to addiction and mental health ministries, because if you don't have sober parents and mentally stable parents, then you can keep feeding kids all day, but they're going to keep needing money because their parents can't do anything. It's like, right. But it's not as sexy. Right. Sexy is I give to kids. Yeah. I give to this stuff.
Kids are sexy. I mean, and that's, again, that's the reality. But the other thing is, like, I don't know how many times, and I don't think I can remember a time where I've been open with my sobriety, and somebody has said to me, like, there's been that moment of relatedness. Yeah. Whether it's the person, a parent, a brother, a girlfriend, a husband, whatever it is, whoever I'm talking to, that hasn't been touched by this thing.
Exactly. But I think people still are in that place where, kind of like that man back in 98 or whatever, I don't want to put my name on this because that associates me with that. Right. And so I try to be really bold with my story because, both my sister and my brother died from drug overdoses. I've almost died multiple times. I've seen men die. I've seen a lot of people die. Yeah. And the battle is still here every day, and I'm willing to fight it. And if you can think of somebody better to give your money to fight this battle, amen. But give to somebody, because the battle will come close to your home one day, and it's going to come knocking. Yeah. And then you're going to be like, I wish I would have seen a better way to help this out beforehand.
Anybody who has a disease or struggles, I'll tell you that in my experience, the ending is a phone call. Yeah. And the phone call is one of three things. In jail, in or death, or I'm got sober. Yeah. I mean, or I guess you could say an institution, a mental hospital or something like that. But
a crack house too.
It ends in the phone call. Yeah. And for a few of us lucky ones, or blessed ones, not blessed ones, but a couple of us who have walked the path, that phone call, at least for the past 26 months, has been the one we want to get. We want to get a lot more too.
Right. Absolutely. So what I want to do is, I'm writing the book, and I'm hoping to raise money and write more books, but for now, this one is going to be about recovery and about how we need to change the way we look at it, but we're writing it towards the church. and it's probably going to get me kicked out of the church. But sometimes I'm not even sure I'm in. So I know Jesus.
Right, exactly.
So, but I want to speak some hard truth in love. But I believe in everything. You and I are so aligned in the way we think. But the collaboration. I believe in science. I believe in science and faith coming together. I believe in the steps and whatever path you have. But I believe that we can't do it in isolation, and we can't just relegate recovery to the people that are trying. We need all of us to be involved. So what I wanted to do is I'm going to read you some of the chapters headings, and then you give like a 1 or 2 sentence answer, like just kind of a rapid fire, like what do you think of these? And some of them, you may think like, I'm sure don't want to answer that one live. So
no, we're good. I'll answer them all.
All right.
I have just a disclaimer. I haven't seen them, so I don't know. Right?
He practices. These are actually his. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So
I was giving the answers before
giving
the
answer
debate,
before
right?
You got a drug test coming up.
Yeah.
Did you study?
Did you
study? All right. So, what is recovery anyway?
Happy, joyous, and free.
Happy, joyous, and free. The spiritual community has missed the boat, in my opinion, on recovery. What do you think of that?
I think that.
Let me preface this.
Yeah.
I'm speaking to Christian community,
right.
not just.
Well, I think that I think society has missed the boat on recovery, right, or on this disease. So I think that yes, on the micro level, I think religion in general, I think has missed the boat on it or doesn't have an understanding of it. I've spoken. I've worked with men who have come in through temples or come in through mosques or whatever it is, and I just think that it's just such a bigger deal than just. I mean, your experience because you're in it is the church, but I think society in general, just for our last conversation, it's completely missed the boat. Right.
I probably should have prefaced that. Like, I'll take me out of the statement, but if you just thought of church and recovery. Christian church in recovery, is it like automatically like, yeah, they got their stuff together?
I mean, I think that I don't know that much about it. I think that I've heard Celebrate Recovery.
Okay.
I know people who've, that has gotten a pathway to recovery.
Okay. So we covered this one, but do you think addiction is more of a, understand the concept of sin, or have you ever thought of the concept of like a spiritual warfare where it's something outside of us? Do you think of it as in either one of those or strictly disease?
I think it's a strictly disease in my experience. I think that the sin, definitely not. I think that the disease causes people to sin. I know I've sinned. Mm-hmm. I think that, even sober, I've sinned, and I will probably sin again.
I got 7 more sins coming up today.
Yeah, exactly.
Scheduled.
Yeah, exactly. And it's only 3 o'clock. I'll be lucky if it's only 7.
Scientific community, do you think they've missed the boat on recovery, and how so?
I think that the scientific community and big pharma and all that thing, I think that they are motivated, to get. I don't think it's curable, but I think they're motivated. You talk about Suboxone. We tried the methadone thing in the '60s, and I understand it intellectually, right? I understand the idea that if you give somebody something, that they won't go out and rob, steal, and cheat to get high. But I don't know if it's a pathway to recovery because it's just trading one for another. But if it can be used, as a means to an end and not a maintenance thing. And then there's other, stuff that's supposed to, calm the cravings. I think the scientific community, and I don't want to put big pharma into the scientific community, but for the sake of purposes, I will. But I think that there's been great advancement in the understanding of the disease as far as science goes.
Right.
And I think it was a couple years ago they isolated again, this is outside my pay grade, but they isolated the addiction thing. And you talk about the reward system, dopamine, and all that stuff. So I think on that end, it has helped people understand it more intellectually. But as far as the pharma, look, it's the obsession of every alcoholic. Like, I can't wait till they come out with it.
Yeah.
A pill that can make me drink normally.
That's not going to happen.
No, I'm not holding out hope for that one. So, but they'll try. So. Yeah, I mean, look, scientifically, and there are people doing great work at the SAMHSA and the I forget the name of it. A lot of alphabets with federal agencies, but there's good research coming on.
Yeah. All right. So I argue that deep down, all human beings, we desire love and relationship, and in some way, a lot of times addiction comes from a brokenness there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the brokenness for me. We talked about earlier was a spiritual problem.
Yeah,
that was when I was broken, and whether it was kindergarten, not feeling a part of, or not just having enough confidence in myself, and just super low self-esteem. That for me is what the disease is about, and it's in the mind, it's in the body, it's in the soul, wherever it is.
Right.
That I was born broken.
Yeah.
With some sort of idea that I could take something from the outside, or that I could find another solution other than a spiritual solution to a spiritual problem.
Yeah. Most people say this, but your thoughts. It's usually like 12 steps to relapse.
12 steps to relapse.
Many steps beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like I said, the relapse in my story happened the moment that somebody told me that it was a pretty easy program. All I had to do was change my whole life. And I didn't use for about 4 months after that. But at that moment, there's a big, in my opinion, a big misunderstanding about a relapse. If this were a drink and I picked it up and I drank it, that's not my relapse. My relapse probably happened months before.
That's the point.
Right, and it was about changing the behavior, like with my story with my ex-wife.
Yep.
That I was on a road to relapse.
Sure.
But that didn't mean I had to relapse. So, the misconception is relapse happens when you take the drink or the drug. But it's what happened before that. It's the actions. It's the with your Harley thing or whatever it is. It's like that when you get distracted from your primary purpose is where it happens.
So, chips are a big part of AA time. What do you think of choices over chips? In other words, like some guys just I just need that 30-day chip. I just need that 90-day chip. I need that 6-month chip. I personally found that to be detrimental to me because it's just because I get to 60 days and then I screw up and I'm like, I got 60 more days. Yeah. I get to a year sober and I'm like a year and a day and screw up and I'm like, it wasn't until I finally said I'm not counting that
days,
anymore. What are your thoughts on that?
I think if you can use it as not as I can't wait to get to 60 days, I can't wait to get to 90 days, because then I think you're internalizing a reward at the end of that, right? But I think that if you can stay in the present, and look, if I'd be lying to you if I didn't say there's a lot wrapped up in when I say 26 years.
Well, yeah.
But and that's that's gotten actually less over time. I think the last chip that I picked up, went to the big there's a Saturday night meeting here in town. It's like Saturday Night Fever. It's 450.
Yeah.
It's a big rah meeting. And I used to go, every year. I think the last time I went I think I go on milestones. Like 20, I went last year to pick up 25.
All right.
So I don't go every year, but there is, as long as you can keep. I think the only one that I really was holding hope for was the 1 year.
Right.
And for whatever reason, once I got that, it wasn't like, okay, now I can now I've graduated. I've never had that sense, but I understand that some people do, and we are wrapped up in time a lot, but it shouldn't be, because the secret is, and although I don't stick to the script all the time, there's nothing different I should be doing than somebody on their first day of sobriety.
Yeah.
And that's the script.
Yeah.
Right? And so as long as I can keep somewhat humble with that, relatively humble, and understand that it's the same thing. It's the same prescription.
Sure.
For that person, it is for me.
Yeah, it doesn't change.
I just have a couple more days,
Yeah. That kind of goes into our next one, is like healing versus curing. What do you think of, obviously, we've talked about it, there isn't a cure, but the process of healing in our recovery, that is ongoing, right?
Oh yeah.
And
Life. I mean, that is recovery, and then there's life, right? And